Alhamdulillah. Happy that we are. I never thought we would actually go that far. So we are really getting close to finishing Surah An-Nisa. And of course, we really went into so many different topics in Surah An-Nisa and covered so many different issues in Surah An-Nisa. And Alhamdulillah, Surah An-Nisa was probably going to be the most challenging surah for me because I didn't think we were ever going to end speaking about all those fiqh issues that we would see risen in Surah An-Nisa, but Alhamdulillah, we did actually pass it. Okay, so yesterday we did actually go over the ayat وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ, and we discussed it, and we were going in, of course, in Tafsir al-Qurtubi, just basically taking Tafsir al-Qurtubi and kind of going over these words so that we would recognize what the Mufassirin were saying. And this is extremely important because many times when you would take the tafsir and you would go in the generalization of the ayat without going to the books of tafsir, you can find yourself pretty much, I would say, roaming around the ayat and not necessarily going into what the mufassirin themselves had actually said in regard to this. So we went in the tafsir and we went in certain details, and we said فَبِظُلْمٍ مِّنَ الَّذِينَ هَادُوا. We said that was really discussing the part about what they had committed in terms of killing the prophets. We said that was an action. Kufrihim, that was the vision. Qulubuna ghulf, it was words. And it's really important to remember that somebody can actually fall in kufr for certain words that they might say, for behavior that they might engage in, and certainly for a wrong vision in regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they might actually embrace. So any of these sides can lead to the person having الطبع على القلب. Let's say just one thing. It came to me, and it just occurred to me, and where in the ahadith do we find that the Prophet ﷺ actually said طبع على قلبه, in terms of the Prophet ﷺ telling us that if a person were to commit such a behavior, that they would actually fall in this. So I thought it would be good to look at some hadith in where, let's see, and right there, I'm just going to share the screen right there just to see, just to make sure we're actually not engaging in certain actions. So we wanted to see what the Prophet ﷺ. So here's number one, in where the Prophet ﷺ had actually mentioned right there, الطبع على القلب, because of somebody committing sins, and too many sins, in other words, insisting to commit a sin. And the hadith that was speaking of that, in where the Prophet ﷺ actually said that a servant might commit a sin and then it would rust in their hearts, a black spot in their heart, no, a black rust. And then if they would basically stop, in other words, repent and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would heal that area that was basically rusted due to the sin. And if they would come back to the sin, then it would come back again. In other words, the rust would come back again and affect their heart. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said, كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. Verily, that is what would cause a rust on their heart as a result of what they had committed, as a result of what they had committed. So even if it's a Muslim, yes, that behavior that they might commit, whether it's something that they might say or things that they might do, it would still have an effect on a person's heart. You could see this hadith is narrated by Tirmidhi and by al-Albani, regarded it as Hasan. The other thing, and of course, let's say right there, and where Iran basically can cause الطبع. Now, the word طبع, we mentioned it yesterday. طبع actually means to stamp or to seal something. So when we're stamping something, we're creating somewhat, think of it as you're really carving something. So you're basically bringing in this deep carve in within the heart, in where it keeps a stain, or it keeps some kind of a carve within the heart. So that's what a taba is. All right. So let's see the second part. التعرض لفتن الشهوات. So basically the person exposing themselves to the different contaminations of different shahawat, different pleasures. So if the person is exposing themselves to shahawat or shubuhat, we talked about shubuhat and shahawat before, and we said, let's write that down to help us kind of differentiate between the two. And we're going to take a little line right there and kind of get that. So here we go. We've got the shahawat and we've got the shubuhat, and let's actually write that, right? So shahawat are basically the different pleasures or the different whims that one might fall into, the different desires. And yet on the other hand, is shubuhat are basically the different misconceptions. So the different misconceptions that one might fall into. In other words, think of it as basically vision. So you could fall in the different whims for, of course, the whims, the practices that one might fall into, and the different things, they're basically the whims. In other words, the vision. So that's actually equivalent to what the ayah was talking about, and where kufrihim, let's go back to the ayah right there, in where it talked about il-kufr, it talked about the vision, gone away from the vision, embracing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it also talked about a certain misconception where they tried to silence the prophets. So what they engaged in was really killing the prophets. So it's a different way of trying to silence the truth, and where you would silence the truth, and of course that brings in a misconception that would surface the person's mind or surface the person's vision right there. So here you could see that this hadith, Hudayf ibn al-Yaman also had quoted the Prophet ﷺ saying that the fitan, or the word fatana, maybe let me also look at that word, because this is a common word that we would use. The word fatana has two meanings. The word fatana actually means to expose on heat. So expose on heat. Why would you expose anything on heat? So you would expose the gold on heat to take away the different soil, the different pebbles, the different soil that would be within the element of gold. So they would heat it, and of course, soil, rocks, they don't melt, but gold melts at a certain degree. So if the gold were to melt by exposing it to heat, that would basically let that gold melt, and then the pebbles and the soil would basically not melt, and they would stay basically within this container, because the other gold had basically become liquid. So that's what happened. That one became liquid, the other ones basically stayed away. So what you had really done you basically did this fitna, or you basically exposed it to hardships, you exposed it to heat, you exposed it to different exposures in order to completely purify it from the other substances. And that's what basically il-fitna would be. But il-fitna could also mean, so that was the crude meaning for fitna, but the other meaning for fitna is anything that would basically expose the person into such hardship. It would put them exposed to certain hardships, where it would basically get them into circumstances that would basically expose them where they might actually lose their iman. Okay, here we go. So تعرض الفتن. the Prophet ﷺ said that the fitan, the person basically would be exposed to different challenges in where on the heart, and it would be exactly like you would have these type of mats that are made of hay sticks, and then these fitan would creep inside the person's heart, which would be exactly like the way that water would seep through the haystack mat. And then if any part of that heart would absorb such a fitna, then it would stain on their heart a black stain. And any heart that would basically reject such a fitna, then it would leave within their heart a white spot until the person would actually have two hearts, a black part or a white part, which basically would be strong, in where it's strong exactly like a rock, like a strong pebble, and or a strong rock, this type of, the safa is more the type of rocks that are formed in rivers. The river rocks, they're really smooth, they're really soft and smooth. So they would be
You
like
said safa?
safa. Yep.
Safa.
So it would be a white, soft, and a smooth, like solid rock, in where whether a fitna were to happen, whether in the heavens or on earth, it would basically not affect the person because their heart was solid. It was really strong. It was white. It was really solid white. The other heart would be aswad, and the word kalkuz, in where it would be a black, and it would be where it would be somewhere in where you could see here السواد والغبرة, in where it would be black, and it would contain somewhere like dust and rust on it, and it would be coming in where this in where it's like a utensil that is closed, like a closed utensil. And what would basically happen in where it starts absorbing anything that comes at it, and then it would not recognize any good that someone had done to it or any good that is around it. And of course, they would not even recognize any wronghood, because it basically would come in accordance to what they're really liking. So what happens, remember yesterday when we talked about الراشدون, in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ فِيكُمْ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ لَوْ يُطِيعُكُمْ فِي كَثِيرٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْرِ لَعَنِتُّمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانَ وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ وَكَرَّهَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْكُفْرَ وَالْفُسُوقَ وَالْعِصْيَانَ أُولَئِكَ هُمُ الرَّاشِدُونَ. Remember when we did that ayah yesterday? That is actually right at the core of what we're saying right now with this hadith. It's right at the core, in where if the person, it's right at the core. If the person is basically Rashid, they're going to be solid white, they're going to be formidable, they're going to be strong to face every single challenge, every single fitna that comes at them. Why? Because any fitna that comes at them, one, they loved al-Iman, they, two, زينه في قلوبهم, they basically had beautified their hearts with it. They only see what is beautiful, only that really is beautiful in the lens that they carry, which is Allah and His Messenger, Quran and Sunnah. So that's why when their hearts would be exposed to any kind of a fitna, they can't handle seeing it. They cannot handle even absorbing it in any way. So what happens? Well, their heart, of course, كره إليهم وكره إليكم الكفر والفسوق والعصيان. And what really happened, talking about them, كره, and they would hate الكفر الفسوق and العصيان. They would hate الكفر, disbelief, and they would hate الفسوق, and they would hate العصيان. They would hate الفسوق, which basically is consistency in sin or major sin, and العصيان would basically be minor sins. So they would hide it. It doesn't blend with them. They don't like such an area at all. Well, on the other hand, Look at this hadith in where, on the other hand, the person that is accepting such a sin, their hearts actually become black, in where not only is it black, but it is right there in where it became, it's black, rusty, it's black, rusty, dusty, and it's kind of like a closed utensil. So kind of like a utensil that has this inner emptiness in
Yeah,
where,
can you like explain that? Because you keep saying utensil, but I'm just trying
okay,
to imagine.
fair enough. Any utensil, it would basically have an opening on the inside. So whether you have a jar, that utensil would have an opening. So it's kind of like an oval shape, and where there's something that can go inside. That's el-kuz, like a pitcher.
Oh, so it's like a jar, kind of
It's like a jar, like a pitcher,
like a
right?
container.
Container in
Oh,
where more of a pitcher, because el kuz is more of a pitcher. So it's a container in where it can contain something inside. So what it contains inside, what it absorbs, is basically all the other fitan. They start fitting inside. They start filling inside. What fills inside? Number one, they would not لا يعرف معروفا. Whether you had done something good to them, they don't even recognize it. They don't even recognize the blessings that surround them. All they see is everything with a negative eye. They're constantly complaining. They're constantly angry. They're constantly sad. They're constantly feeling in depression. They're constantly not even recognizing even the good that others did to them. They're always just seeing everything with a negative eye. Why? Well, because their hearts had filled with such filth, in where they did not have hubb iman, they did not have zinat iman, they did not have that separation between them and the different contaminants. What they're filled with is really nothing but contaminants. And remember,
oh, so that's where the vision gets affected.
exactly. So when you're looking at number one, when you're looking at the influences, what you're seeing, it's exactly like when you're trying to understand the human, the human anatomy, anywhere you're looking, okay, well, the nerves do one particular thing, the brain does one particular thing, the heart does one particular thing, and you're trying to, if you would go to the doctor and say, well, does the pain radiate? Does the pain local? And they're basically trying to understand whether this is muscular, or whether this is muscular, or whether this is actually something that is nerve related, or whether it's bone related, etc. And what they would look at is really how, by you describing the pain, you're basically giving a very important key to helping that doctor know which organ is actually causing all of this. Now, for the Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ gave us certain keys to help us recognize what organ is actually causing all of this. Is it ishahwa, or is it ishubha? And certainly then that's going to help us understand, by that lifestyle and by the effect, you're going to see that their hearts were either coming in with all these different shubuhat, or whether it is coming in with shahawat, or of course whether what we're seeing right now, in where the society coming in it, where they don't even see the blessing, they don't even recognize that there's something wrong. Even when you were to say that this is wrong, they'll come at you. It's like, why is it wrong? Why are you being judgmental? And you're like, me being judgmental? You don't recognize that it's wrong? No, I don't recognize that it's wrong, but I recognize that you're saying something that is judgmental. You could see right there, their vision is completely contaminated, couldn't even
You know, this is
recognize.
this is like Islamic psychology. This is
It's
this is
exactly,
psychology.
that's what I'm trying to get to. It's Islamic psychology. That's what I'm trying to get to. I'm really trying to get to that point in where, how do we understand human behavior? How do we understand human motives? How do we understand the structure, the real nature of what makes human? What makes human, what makes something that is considered within the natural boundary, because you cannot define something as natural unless you knew what really makes human. And that is not to be described by, of course, somebody where, I don't know, you got Sigmund Freud who's going to come and tell me what human is, or probably John Locke or another person, and the list goes on and on. What human is can only be defined by the one that created the human on what he wanted human to be. Because we can
Allahu Akbar.
we can overlap with animals without us realizing. We can think, and we can get this blurriness and confuse the animal behavior with the human behavior. And that's what happened even with those that are basically the evolutionists, and they would come and tell you, well, this is exactly like the animal, and then they got confused thinking, well, anyways, hey, we're just basically just matter in motion, or we're just really another type of an animal that is a thinking creature animal, but really we're just animals. And where they basically fell into this misconception, and where they're really confused about all of it. So what could only explain what makes human is really Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What makes human is really by the creator himself, to tell us what makes human, in order to tell us what level we were, one, created with a certain capacity, and two, what we were supposed to get to. Because what makes human is not necessarily only this, let's say, physical part of human, but also another piece of the human body or the human being is really the purpose that preceded their existence. So one side is that okay, the functioning of the body, that's one side, but why is it functioning that way? Where is it heading? The second, yesterday I was watching this documentary, in where a very beautiful documentary, except I guess some of the scenes that were, you know, the scenes that were probably, I don't know, they could have actually removed such scenes, but the documentary was about human development, and the way that people were, well, basically the early human development, when we're speaking about fetus and all of that. But what was really beautiful within that documentary, and where it was talking about and bringing in a number of different poems, and where the heart beating, tick tock, beating right there within the very early stages, and all of the sudden it's like one cell just creates this vibration, and the rest of the cells within the heart continue to basically sing the song. But it wasn't a song, it was basically the beginning of your life.
Do you remember the name of the documentary?
Oh, I'll give it to you, inshallah. I'll give it to you.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. It's where, just to think of it, that basically announces that no, you were created for a purpose, whether it's your heart, or whether it's the way that your cells had formed, or whether the way that your genes, the cells, the forming of the genes, the forming of the cells, the forming of your DNA, and the passing, and all of that, and how one stage after the other stage, it basically is telling you that there is a master behind all of this, directing all the different potentials to basically head towards one particular direction, one particular purpose. And it's not just by chance, in where some kind of an energy working its way to getting itself just finding its corners, and where it's just an empty energy. Definitely not empty energy, but an energy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would actually create right there. Now, one thing in where, when you're looking at all of this, the Prophet ﷺ was basically here teaching us that, listen, in order to define human, yes, the body is one part, but then there's the other, which is the qalb, the heart. Then there's the other, which is a ruh. And that's why, if you were to look at the different ahadith where the Prophet ﷺ talked about, yes, one side of our actions, what we say, what we do, and that is ما كانوا يكسبون. But then you would look at another hadith, and the Prophet ﷺ said, إن أحدكم يجمع خلقه في بطن أمه 40 يوما نطفة. You would be combined for 40 days as a nutfa. What was he trying to say? He was trying to take you into a stage, the stages of development, in where you would be nutfa, you would be a alaqa, you would be a mudgha, you would be, then the malak would come in, the angel would come in. Ay Rabb, ذكر أو أنثى. What is the creature here? What am I supposed to be doing? Who gives the order? It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh Allah, the rizq, the ajal, shaqi or sa'id. How do we understand this, the future of this human being? Where are they heading? That is the purpose. Where's this person going? What is the purpose that they were created for? They had a purpose. But of course, the evolutionists are going to tell you, you don't have a purpose. You're just basically of another matter in motion. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Islam tells you, no, you've got a precious purpose, a more precious purpose than the creation of the heavens and the earth and every single magnificent creation that you see around you. You've got a more magnificent purpose that caused and brought this magnificent creation together. The purpose is even more magnificent. The intended reason for the creation and for your creation is actually something that you need to consider with each and every single tick-tock of your heart, of your body, of the circulation of your blood, of every single potential that you were given, every single potential, whether it's the ability to see, the ability to hear, the ability to talk. What are you using it for? What are you filling your heart with? What is that goose? What is that container? What are you filling the container that is within you with? Are you filling it and making it white and solid to be strong, to fit, and to face each and every single misconception or every single whim that might come at you? Or are you containing each and every single misconception? It basically comes at you because you did not spend your time to learn your Islam. Are you there? Taking every and absorbing every misconception? Or every single fitna of whim coming at you. You see a picture, you see an image, and you start wanting to imitate it. You see a certain trend and wanting to trend it and become part of it. What did your heart actually get filled with? What did you actually work in trying to make your heart be strong to face all those different contaminations that would be coming at you? So right there, the Prophet ﷺ was teaching us that other things might actually be those areas that might actually fill the heart in, where the person is, one, keeping away from their salah, especially for men. Why men and not women? Well, it's basically telling us that the exposure and that men are different than women, and that women's fitna, in where the way their body, the way their heart, the way their mind, all the dynamic of how they were created, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave women certain obligations in certain challenges, let's say, in where it's not for the men, but it's basically for you as a woman. It's a prescription to suit your psychology, your own self. And at the same time, there are certain things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave men and asked them to do certain things, like Salatul Jumu'ah for men. By keeping away from Salat al-Jumu'ah, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man taraka thalatha juma'in tahawunan biha طبع الله على قلبه. If men were to leave Salat al-Jumu'ah for 3 consecutive Jum'ahs, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would stamp on their hearts that they are actually munafiq. But that's not the case with women, telling us that no, as a woman, your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has different corners, versus on the other hand, for example, when we're looking at hijab, it's completely different in where the relationship, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ta'abbadana, asked us to worship him in different ways. The psychology of men's psychology, they have to be given this type of leadership, this type of role model, this type of, let's say, structure. They have to be within a certain group, or else they'll basically drift away. We need you to be part of a social gathering to basically blend with that, versus
I have a question.
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
Would you recommend that that even though, you know, as sisters, like, we're not men, but like, would you recommend sisters going for Salatul Jummah in, let's say, America?
Yes, absolutely. Even if they were sisters, I mean, this is basically telling us it's obligatory on the man. What does that mean? It's obligatory on the women. So it's not obligatory on the women, but it stays within the recommendation for women as well. So
Okay,
at
Jazakallah khair.
it stays within the recommendation. It states that they will get rewarded for attending Salat al-Jumu'ah, or attending Salat al-Masjid, or attending those gatherings. So same thing, if we're actually talking about other practices, there are certain practices that are more obligatory on men and more sunnah on women, and certain actions, they're more obligatory on women, but sunnah on, or sunnah on men to do. So you're looking at where in fact, there are certain actions in where it's recommended for women and haram on men to do. Believe it or not, some scholars actually said that it is obligatory or recommended that women wear gold. You're like, really? That
Oh wow.
it is. It's really strange. You know, some scholars actually went to as far as saying, well, no, they have to wear gold. It's obligatory for them to wear. I mean, that's rare. That's really extreme. Majority actually said,
Especially if they couldn't afford it, right?
exactly, but recommended that they would wear gold, versus it's haram on men. They all agreed that it's haram. The Prophet ﷺ actually said, فَإِنَّهَا لَهُمْ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَلَنَا فِي الْآخِرَةِ, in terms of using it as a utensil as well. So you could see there certain instructions. You know, what Sharia is for is really to help us understand our own nature, our own psychology, to help us understand what would make us more human, what would make us more female, what would make us more male, if it's a male, of course. All right. What would make us within the structure that basically heads towards the purpose that we were created for as human beings. So when you're looking at certain instructions, there's no way that we can understand the purpose that preceded our existence if it doesn't actually come outside of a metaphysical, outside of matter, because matter itself is only going to give us keys in understanding the function of matter, or at least what matter and how it works and where and how it functions, but not why it functions. Because understanding and studying matter is basically just going to give you keys in understanding the matter side of human being. But human beings are not only matter. We've got the purpose and basically the ruh, the soul, the spirit that is within us. That is even more important than the body itself, because right there, the ruh itself is what actually brought about the whole purpose that preceded the existence. Now, one thing is that to understand human, you really need al-wahy, not dhann, not speculation. Because speculation or theory or the different studies or human intelligence, that is only designated and only has the potential to study one side of human, not all sides. Yet, when we're speaking about il-hawa lets you recognize that you are liking certain things, hating certain things, absorbing certain things, that you're recognizing certain relationships between you and your surroundings. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent you al-wahy to help you recognize what your intelligence is not capable of recognizing, and your feelings and your senses are not capable of detecting. So therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ وَمَا تَهْوَى الْأَنفُسُ وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّن رَّبِّهِمُ الْهُدَى. Al-Huda was basically that guidance in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to give you the key, the knowledge that basically had formed you and formed the destination that you're heading towards. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ had actually come, all the prophets had come to give you the instruction on how to be human, how to live the purpose of a human, and how to actually head towards that purpose. That's what Sharia is. Sharia is just that, because it's not within your potential, within your capacity to understand just by using your own intelligence to understand the way that we are designed and what we're heading to. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ basically given certain, of course, instructions for women and certain instructions for men. It's basically to tell you your body was designed for such a purpose, your psychology was designed for such a purpose, and therefore the more you go in congruence with the purpose, the nature that you were created for, the more stable and the happier you will find yourself. The farther you ditch
SubhanAllah.
away, the farther you ditch away from your own nature, from the purpose that you were created for, you're going to find yourself blending in a different type of an area of mental illness being on the rise, mental illness as an individual, and of course, social illnesses, more crime, more violence, more hate. And of course, certainly, you're going to find yourself creating narratives and going into more narratives, thinking that I've got it, I'm going to figure this out, when in reality, what you're really putting is a narrative on a definitely nothing but poison. It was basically either going to be a narrative to foil and wrap around either a misconception or a whim or a desire that basically had gone wrong. So the Prophet ﷺ was basically giving us those areas to help us understand what are the things that would basically keep us away from getting that taba ala al-qalb, what's affecting the heart, where and what and how do we seek it? Let's call it the treatment. And that's what, to be honest, I think we would definitely give the Sufi literature, I would say, the best credit for understanding that piece of human. Okay, forget about
Are
the
you
bid'ah.
talking
Well,
about mostly Imam Ghazali?
I'm talking about al-Ghazali. I'm talking about, of course, a lot of the literature in terms of course, there are many more than al-Ghazali. There are many more than al-Ghazali because we cannot necessarily just consider al-Ghazali, because even if you were to go for Ighathat al-Lahfan, for example, you were to go to Ibn al-Qayyim, you were to go to Ibn Qudama, you were to go to even Ibn Taymiyyah, although yes, perhaps he had actually talked about the Sufi as a group, as secondary, and all those, and talked about it as what is considered as a school. But at the same time, you do see that there were some, let's say, inspirations that they also had benefited from those schools, in where it's understanding the qalb, what affects the qalb, what affects the ruh, what do we actually need to learn in terms of akhlaq, because there's no way that you can live akhlaq al-mu'min, the mannerisms of a believer, unless you learn how to get out of what makes you feel that comfort. Because if you really want to live, there are two comforts. There's the comfort that is that is right now, that you're rushing. I want that comfort in where, for example, I want to feel comfortable, I want to feel happy, and what do? I basically eat sugar, for example. You eat sugar, but then without you realizing, in the long run, if you were to take in more sugar, in the long run, that's either going to get you into obesity, or that's going to get you into diabetes. Or what did you do? Did you really live a comfortable zone, or did you really put yourself into this temporary comfort that actually resulted in the long run, pains? And that's the same thing. You invest right now certain investments in where right now you live certain, whether you're abstaining from certain things or whether you are forcing yourself to do certain things, you are then going to invest in a farther, more stable, long-term happiness. And that's what Sharia is all
I
about.
I have a I have a question.
So
So let's say for like college students, what would you recommend? Because I know that the fitna is stronger for them, you know what I mean? And not just, I mean, the fitna for all what you've been talking about, for social media and their peers and all that.
what is the question, Noura?
Well, okay, so let's say for like college students, and it seems like their fitna is stronger than, let's say somebody who's older, who's,
Agree.
you know, yeah. So what do you recommend for them?
So I think it's important to keep in mind that sometimes we're pushing our children into college and not recognizing the fitan that they are really getting exposed to. So, do I necessarily recommend college for everyone? The answer is no. Sometimes you would really have to understand that particular person. Do I recommend every single field for everyone? The answer is no. So certain mentorship is actually important in where having that knowledge in where what goes on campus. So humanities, especially English literature, women's studies, global studies, philosophy, those theology, all those fields, they are loaded with fitna. Psychology is even part of that. I would always recommend, do not have your children enroll in such departments. I know it is a fitna to actually say do not enroll in such departments, because we're seeing, well, if the Muslims don't actually go into such departments, then there are going to be others that are filling such departments. We keep in mind that what you are asked to do as a Muslim is really first to bring in that your own survival. But such fields, they are loaded. They are really controlled, and I will say controlled by the atheist group, by the liberal group, and of course, the professors that are within these fields. Unfortunately,
Okay, so just avoiding studying
those areas. If I were to recommend, I know it's not for everybody. I know it's not for everybody, and I know that girls tend to like humanities more than they would like the sciences. But even if we're to talk about sciences, biology, that's unless you're capable of really having a good professor to back you up. And in other words, sometimes depending on which university you're going to. So if you're going to study biology, for example, I would definitely say don't go to a university that is a state university, at least in America. Why? Because that's going to be an atheist founded university most of the time. If you are wanting to study biology, I would definitely recommend going to a Christian university, because it would basically tend to somehow blend the deist part of it, and not necessarily just spew these theories at you and make you think that they're nothing but facts. So certain fields, I would say you would really have to be aware how the university is structured and where it's heading. And at the same time, if we're talking about same thing when we're speaking about, for example, psychology, if you wanted to study psychology, I would definitely say go to a Christian university than actually go to a state university. I would definitely not recommend studying humanities, at least those fields, unless you really are grounded well with understanding Islam. And
Jazakallah khair, Jazakallah
this
khair.
is, have the ilm of Islam. Having the ilm in Islam is extremely important while you're studying the university, or let me call it the secular studies. You really have to be a part of, number one, studying on the other hand, either online, you've got Islamic studies online, or you've got in person. You really have to study in those, in be part of those Islamic studies, and at the same time, create and even have Islamic bonds even on campus. And what I mean by Islamic bonds, I'm talking about advocating for the Muslim students to have a Muslim chaplain there, and you being part of who's actually the chaplain, you choosing, because they can have a Muslim chaplain, they're not even Muslim, but they could be Jewish chaplains that are serving the Muslim students. So that becomes really, what is a chaplain right there? So you being part of it and advocating for the Muslim students, advocating and even being part of the MSA. A lot of times the MSA themselves, there are a bunch of different students where they're trying to create an activity, but I would say most of that activity had gone wrong, in where they don't really understand their aspirations, and of course the duty to serve the Muslim community, to serve the Muslim students. This is extremely important. How do we serve the Muslim students? What does it mean to serve the Muslim students?
So having like a mentor who has knowledge of Sharia, right?
Well, to serve the Muslim students, one, that's the role of a chaplain, in where to serve the Muslim students, one, to advocate for them for certain rights, whether it's having an area for them to do wudu in, facilitating a prayer area for them to have, facilitating, even advocating for the students whenever there's a misconception, instead of the students actually being cornered in different classrooms, to actually have the chaplain have the ilm to answer the questions that they're probably asked to answer. And that way the students, at many times I did see that cornering the students with the questions, at many times the students are feeling that I have to answer these questions, but in reality, what the professor professor is really trying to do is trying to, let's say, empty the student of their own confidence about their own faith, about their own.
Oh yeah, and you talked about that yesterday.
Right. So that piece of it, in where how do we advocate for the students, even as an MSA, how do we advocate for the students as an MSA is one, to educate them and to bring someone that educates them about Islam if they're not educated to educate. So bring the right people. And of course, the university can allocate with the student senate, and the university can allocate, and the students have to form a body in order to allocate a certain funding. Okay, a certain funding to pay for the speakers, to pay for the activities, and therefore that's part of what the MSA is supposed to do, is really to have the funding, not only to bring and make food, but even have the funding to pay for the speakers, invite the right speakers, create the different activities. And tabling is extremely important. What do we mean by tabling? So there are certain areas that are considered heavy traffic within the university. So having tables and setting tables in where you being active yourself. What does it mean to be active yourself? It actually means whether one, you are sharing pamphlets on the on school campus, or whether you're probably displaying videos, or probably giving people the chance to hear the Quran, hear the Adhan. You've got these headphones, people can hear the Adhan, or people can hear this, or sometimes having public areas where you're basically having these tables and where you're allowing people to come and ask questions about Islam. Who are you? What is Islam? What does Islam say? Etc. Even if people in the beginning might not actually be coming.
Oh yeah, like those dawah tables.
The dawah tables. This is extremely important because what it does, number one, it basically empowers the students themselves to be leaders, to search for answers for the questions that they are basically right there asked to answer. So it lets the students themselves feel that they are leaders. It creates within them the confidence. It creates within them the pride. This is a key word. Why I like the tabling? Because it actually acts as this way to empower the students, to build their confidence, and to also let others see them, that they are active. And at the same time, it creates within the students the urge to seek knowledge, the urge to seek answers to the questions that are coming at them. It builds within them, one, the leadership, two, the urge for seeking ilm, three, the urge to keep them intact as a group. We have to do this table here. You do that table there on this day. And many times university campuses can be, I would say, very a very big fitna, because you're trying to focus on your studies, but then this is coming at you. And at the same time, these hours, these leisure times between one class and the other, it can be a place of fitna. You're meeting with certain people and you're meeting with certain groups. You've go to the cafeteria, some girls are there, some boys are there, some friends are there. You've got certain time. This free time becomes a fitna. So to fill this leisure time, those empty times, with activism is going to actually help you. Rather than you be somebody's work, you become the person to do the work, the person to
Oh
be
yeah,
active.
I like that. Jazakallah khair.
This is extremely important, but instead of you being somebody's object and somebody's subject, you are the person that is doing the role of doing and working on the different people around you. You're being the leader right there. This is extremely important. And of course, there's really a lot more to say, but the parents themselves, they also have a role. So not because I know that, I like, for example, this field and they'll go into it and etc. You don't just like a field.
I think, you know what? Honestly, I think it's a great idea if like for this summer when for your Aqidah course, for example, if some moms and their daughters join?
You know, I think it's important to actually remember, even as parents, it not because somebody likes a certain class during school, it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, they can't like a class or another class later on. Because the reason why we might have actually liked a class, maybe the instructor made it easy. One instructor just made it easy. Yes, sometimes our mind, I mean, we could see that certain people, their minds work great with mathematics, but then they don't do very well in terms of literature, in terms of humanities, etc. So we definitely see there are a number of different reasons to why certain people do great in, they would have, I guess, the intelligence for it and the skill for it, and then they could do outstanding when they are actually part of a certain field. But let's not necessarily just let that child on their own. So you need to, as a parent as well, and as somebody that might understand what goes on campus, there has to be a mentorship that understands the fitna on ground and also understands the different universities, how they're functioning, the different fields, and who's actually motivating such field and where it's actually going. And even the parents themselves actually advocate for their children, that sometimes just for my children, for example, if they want to study a certain field, that I might actually need to change the state, I might need to change the country, that even if you're looking at, okay, well, we're already here, we already bought a house, etc. But hey, what is more important to you, your children's deen, or, and I've seen that a lot, and where we would have students that came from Saudi Arabia, we had students at St. Catherine came from Saudi Arabia, students that came from Kuwait, Bahrain, and in different countries. They actually came in, even though St. Catherine University was an all-women university, but we had many students actually lose their deen on campus. They came in first year, and by third year, by fourth year, they're a completely different student. What really happened? So it was, yes, the campus, it was, yes, the university, it was, there are a lot of things that actually happen. So don't rush in sending your children away and thinking, well, I know my child. Guess what? The fitna on campus, I had seen it many times. Many times, the fitna on campuses is far more than just a fitna of shahwa, than a fitna of girls and boys and all those different things. No, the misconceptions there, the shubuhat, those are, I would say, an agenda. There is an agenda that is basically working on indoctrinating the students. So we have to be aware on where we're sending our students to, and to how
That's a good idea for like in the summer, you know, having like
it's
a
extremely
seminar or
important
something
to
on
be
that.
aware of that, because if you're not aware of it, you're going to find yourself really losing your child right before your eyes, and then it's going to be too late for you to actually come help. My son is right now an atheist, like right, he's been going to school for 4 years, and right now you expect me to basically refute and create all these rebuttals for all these different misconceptions that they have been really fed with and indoctrinated in for the past 4 years. You want me to do it in 1 hour? There's no way. There's no way. They would come to you and it's like, okay, come on, Sheikh, I want you to actually help my child. He basically is an atheist now. It's like, well, he's been attending those classes, he's been attending these groups, he's been attending all these misconceptions, he's been all of that. And what do you end up with? You end up really in that.
Yeah, and then they would have no knowledge of Islam. The kid would have no knowledge of Islam.
Exactly. And then they end up really, I would say, filled with all these different misconceptions, in where even if you were to answer one misconception, it would be another misconception. Right before you even answer the first misconception, it would be one after the other, because they had been exposed to all these different indoctrinations that for the past 4 years during their undergrad, they basically completely lost their Islam. Within these 4 years, you thought that they were just trying to gain a degree. I'll work it out later, but you had lost your son right there. What help does it do? And of course, what win did we really get if we lost our sons and daughters' iman? We lost their akhirah, but we got them to get the cap and the graduation ceremony. What type and what celebration is that? Congratulations, your son lost their deen. Are you serious? Are you serious? That's something to celebrate. So I would really say, when we're choosing a university, when we're choosing a field, it is a serious matter, and don't necessarily just celebrate that, yeah, they're studying this field, they're actually doing this, they're going to become this, they're going to be making this much money. Most fields,
that's not going to matter in the grave. It's not.
Exactly. It's not going to matter. Allah al-Musta'an. Back to Tafsir. So who's telling me back to Tafsir and I'm already late?
Shame on me. I'm sorry.
That's okay. And here's the sister. What the dawah limitations with regard to personal privacy and dignity should we share? We've changed to inspire others over our dignity. Say a person was promiscuous or homosexual. Just had a discussion with a friend yesterday. Okay, so when we're actually talking about the person's past, okay, the certain privacies in certain, of course, certain information should only be shared with one. If you wanted to, let's say, wanted to seek the ilm and basically helping you probably get that, let's call it spiritual treatment, okay? Or the fatwa in regards to certain things, I would call it the adab, or at least the way to preserve your dignity. Keep yourself as anonymous as possible. Please keep yourself as anonymous as possible, because that is not only good for you, but that's also good for the sheikh that you're asking as well. The sheikh is a human at the end of the day. By you preserving your dignity, by you staying anonymous, you are preserving your dignity. Don't expose yourself. Number two, if you're actually getting, let's say, that part of how much you want to share, it's important to educate yourself on that topic in order to know what questions and what issues are related to it. It's exactly when you might actually have certain pains that you're probably wondering what it is, but then you go and Google certain, symptoms that you're feeling, and you're trying to see, well, what symptom needs to be told to the doctor and what symptom is probably irrelevant or whatever. But then, of course, the doctor is going to be determining whether this is a relevant or an irrelevant symptom, and the list goes on and on. So at the end, educate yourself in general about Islam, and that in itself, it doesn't come where it's not in Islam, it's not one prescription in where, here we go, your prescription right there, and that should basically clear out your gut or clear out your heart, and you're all done. Islam is a little, I would say, more sophisticated than medicine, even though medicine right now is considered probably the most sophisticated study, but that's because during our times. But before, during the times of the golden era of Islam, only the very, very intelligent ones got to make it, with the ones that were considered of a high GPA. The very intelligent ones got to make it to study fiqh, got to make it to study tafsir. Those were considered the top students. So it's really important to understand that when you study Islam, that's going to be helping you understand all those sophisticated things in your life, whether it's relating to your heart, or whether it's relating to your body, or whether it's related to your social dynamic and how that's affecting you, or whether that's related to your job and business and all of that. And that's why it was actually considered the most sophisticated study, because it involves every single corner in our life and understanding how it correlates with our behavior, how it correlates and affects our mind, how it affects our hearts, how it affects who we are. It creates this, I would say, this ground, this field in where it helps you know more about yourself and how things are affecting you. And many times, you don't really want to share with anybody, whether that's a person that's a sheikh, or whether that's a person that's a doctor. You don't want to share your personal life in regards to each and every single thing. So learn your Islam. And by learning your Islam, you're basically correcting those different pieces within your life to match, one, what you need and your, let's say, your vision of what you want, what suits you, because what suits you is different than what suits person A or B, or what suits me. And then there are certain things that you want to know that it's halal, that it's okay to do, and that I'm living with a certain vision. I'm learning, I'm wanting to fit certain circumstances in my life. And that's why it's important to learn Islam, to help you make the right choices. Because an imam, or let me say a sheikh or a sheikha, they can understand certain pieces of your life, certain areas, but those areas you know more about. So what you really need to know is really that ground, that area, that field that suits your vision, your circumstances, your life. You would know more about it than anyone else. So by learning your Islam, you're basically creating that ground to help you know your social aspect, your financial aspect, and certainly your physical, and certainly your psychological, all those areas, in order for you to actually create, let me say, the foundation that suits your circumstances. And what is halal for you? Let's see another question. What's the main issue of the people or world today? The main issue, even in past, or what would be further? Let's see the question. Well, I mean, the main issue is either tawheed. That's the main issue. It's either tawheed or kufr. Because if you actually put the main issue, it's not just for the people of today, but throughout history, it's either tawheed or kufr. It's either that the person is embracing Islam or not embracing Islam. Because if we're having our foundation in place, then you're going to be having all the implications of what your vision is founded on, really really coming the same direction. So if we're talking about what's the main issue, it's really either tawheed or kufr. That's the main issue throughout history. If you were to have Islam and tawheed, then you're going to understand that, hey, you have to apply Sharia. If you have your vision based on kufr, whether it's called atheism or whether it's called secularism, Christianity, whatever it is, then your implication, the behavior, the laws, the understanding of ethics is going to be based on that. So when we talk about main issue, it's going to be tawheed or kufr right there. So inshallah, I know we kind of drifted away from our tafsir, but inshallah we will continue our tafsir tomorrow, inshallah. I know we kind of drifted away. We really drifted away. But if there are any questions before we end right here, sorry, but I'm really.
I mean, there's no race. Don't worry. Alhamdulillah.
We're
what?
getting through. We're going along, alhamdulillah.
We're going along. So even if we're actually doing that piece and speaking about what happens on campus, that's actually part of that, and understanding, understanding what's relating our children, what's relating our own aqidah and our family's aqidah as well. So keeping that within, let's say, our practical life, I think is important. So it's not enough to actually speak about the theory of it, but also the practice of it is also important. So I need to actually end our tafsir right now, inshallah. And subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. And we will, inshallah, continue tomorrow with our tafsir. I know we kind of drifted away, but inshallah, well, Allah yahfadhku ya Rabbi. All right, assalamu alaikum.
Inshallah. And don't forget to register for summer semester courses with Gems of Light.
Yes, inshallah, exactly. Don't forget to do that.